You're watching the Forefront Church video podcast. And wherever you're at viewing online, we just want to say thank you and welcome. And one of the ways that we can help connect with you is we want to hear from you and where you're at and how we can help. And so head over to forefrontchurch.info after the message and click the Connect tab. It's a great way for us to help you along your spiritual journey as you connect with God and learn about Jesus. And so sit back, relax. We hope that you're challenged and encouraged from today's message. Facebook Live, I'm glad you guys are with us today. Chime in and let us know where you're tuning in from. Wave to everybody with some emojis and all that. 10 a.m., how are we doing today? Doing good. I'm excited as we continue our series of Pixel Perfect Christmas. But before we jump in, I want to let you know about some really cool things that are happening tonight. You've been hearing about it. Jingle Jam takes place, and we do this every year. It's a family experience that our kids do for all the other kids and for other families that are here. But this year, we, because of your generosity, connections with Aid Now, the nonprofit that we helped to start, we work with them during the year to do these events for homeless, displaced, and marginalized families in Virginia Beach. And we have over 100 kids and their families are going to be in this very room at 3 p.m. We're doing 2 showings, one for kids that go here, and one, because it's kind of the test run. Eventually, our goal is that everything will be intermingled, but we want to make sure like we care for them well. And so this room at 3 p.m. is going to be filled with families that maybe have never been to church, maybe never heard the name of Jesus, and they're going to get gifts because of your generosity. They're going to get to, there's a Santa Claus that got hired. They're going to meet him. They're going to hear about the story of Jesus from this stage. And I want to pray right now the opportunity that God's opened up and given for us as a church, that we would get out of God's way and let him do the work in caring for people. And so before we get into the message and all of that, that's great because it reminds us why we need to get out of our own way because we're all about us. But instead, I want to pray right now that what happens in this room at 3 p.m., that God does what only he could do, which is the miraculous. And so why don't you pray with me? God, I thank you that you provide opportunities for us as a church, like we learned over the last 8 weeks, to not simply be a church that happens to be in a city, but that we will always operate as a church for our city, bringing your love and your hope to anyone that we encounter, no matter where they find themselves in life. And today, God, you have honored that movement by giving us the opportunity to care for, love, and lavish with gifts in your story, this movement of grace and hope. And today in this room, God, while we enjoy our time together on Sundays and different times throughout the week, I pray that you would do something unlike any other in what happens and takes place today at 3 p.m. God, that people that walk through these doors will know that you are real, that you are safe, and the only way that we can get through life is with you and your son, Jesus. And it's in his name we pray. Amen. So I'm excited today. That's going to be great. Looking forward to that. But today we're in our series, and I want to ask you guys a question right out of the gate. How many of you guys ever been lost? Show of hands. You ever gotten lost? Yeah, most of the ladies will raise their hand. Most of the guys won't. I get it. Guys, I've never been lost. I have just pondered whether the directions were true. I have no shame in my game. I do not get, if we're lost, I'm going to ask for directions. But there was a time where I was not with my family and they got lost. It was a while back. They went to Woodstock Park. I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever been there. They're redoing it. It's going to look great. But they went to Woodstock Park, and during that time, me and my girls have been watching a guilty pleasure, a show called Finding Bigfoot. Any of you guys ever seen that show? Yeah, newsflash, and spoiler alert, they never find him. It's weird how that works out. And so we were watching that show. It was a guilty pleasure. We enjoyed it. But they went to the park, and they said, hey, let's go walk the trails and look for Bigfoot. And so they went walking on the trails. I'm at work, and then all of a sudden, I get a phone call. Said, hey, what's going on? Hey, we're lost. And the girls had said, you need to call daddy. And she's like, we're not calling your dad. But they ended up calling me because I guess the girls had complained enough that we're lost. I said, why are you lost? And my wife begrudgingly said, because of Bigfoot. And it was a playful conversation. But in the background, I remember hearing this from one of the kids. I don't know which one. That because I just wanted to see him. I didn't want to get lost. And I think that's probably pretty true for most of us in life. When we want to go to a destination, we just want to get to the destination. None of us ever want to get lost. Like, getting lost isn't on our agenda. We don't set out on an adventure and go, you know what would be great if I got lost? That would be amazing. No, none of us want to do that. We want to go to the place. We want to see the people, go to the experience, whatever the case may be. But getting lost is not on our agenda at all. You know, for life and faith, we're very much the same way. God, I want you to do a great thing in my life. I just really don't want to put in the work. God, I really would love for you to show up and take away this burden in my job, aka like just get rid of my boss or get rid of the coworker or whatever. God, I would really like you to make my family really awesome. And by that, like maybe you just need to, set my kid's shoes on fire for a second. Let him know, quit being that kid. Like whatever you need to do, strike him down, not kill him, but like strike him down and let him know like, hey, and be like, hey, see, God tell you, now behave. Like we go, God, just do whatever you need to do. But you know what? I just want the end goal. I don't want to deal with all the extra stuff. God, I want my life to be healed, but could you just do it and not let me go through a time of waiting? Because I don't really like to wait. Because, God, we live in a culture where we don't like to wait for much of anything. Teacher and author Ravi Zacharias, he wrote it this way. He said, we all want Canaan without going through the wilderness. And what he's referring to is the Israelites during biblical times were in captivity in Egypt. And they kept praying for God to help them and free them. And so they were freed from slavery and got out and ran. And they go, all right, God's promised us he's going to give us this great place, this promised land. There was only one problem. They wandered for years and years and years and years. And they started complaining to the people leading them. They go, you know what? This is awful. It would be better to be back in Egypt or even die there because we're going to die here and we're hungry. I'd rather die there. And waited and waited and waited. They go, where is God's promise? When's that going to come? When's that thing going to happen? And what he's saying there is, man, we just want God's promise without ever going through a moment of difficulty. God, can you just show up and do what you're supposed to do and then move on? And then I can get back to being me and doing my thing, and it'll all be fine. I love that the arrival of Jesus changes all that. This whole idea that somehow we're not going to go through difficult times with God, that sometime everything's going to be fine. And maybe you've been given that promise that if I follow Jesus, everything will be rainbows and butterflies and a yellow brick road, and then we're going to walk into this beautiful thing. If you've been promised that, I want to lovingly correct and dispel that myth. It's not true. If you follow Jesus or you don't follow Jesus, you will still encounter hard times. The difference for somebody that claims Jesus and follows him and doesn't is, for me, following Jesus, I have a hope unlike any other that sustains me even when it's difficult. You see, if you don't get anything else, my prayer is that you hear this when we focus in on this story of Jesus, which is why we said pixel perfect Christmas, that past all that, because a picture perfect Christmas is all of us scrolling on our devices, zoning out into movies, and ignoring the family that we love so much. What if we were to pull away and really focus in on the story of Jesus' birth and coming? What we'd find is the arrival of Jesus brings hope to your spirit and light to your wilderness. The very things that you think that you can't get through, the coming of Jesus says, yes, you can. But the only way that you can get through it is with me. And I know you want to do it on your own, but don't try to do it on your own because you're going to wander off. And then all of a sudden you're going to go, man, we really wanted to search for that and now we're lost. What happened? What if we could go back to the beginning and start it the right way? And the prophet Isaiah had this moment where he shared this very truth. And if you have a Bible, I'd love for you to turn over to Isaiah chapter 9. It's in the Old Testament of the Bible. If you don't have a Bible, we give them away for free out in our lobby. Stop by there and grab one. No catch. You don't have to fill anything out. You pick one up today. That's your new Bible to keep. Or if you're more digitally inclined, for you guys watching online, you can head to forefrontchurch.info. Continue to swipe till you get to the notes section. Click on that every week. All that we're talking about is right there. You can fill in notes, email those back to yourself, and just be able to keep up with what's going on, rewatch it on our YouTube channel, bring up your notes, and really be able to have some clarity. In those moments when Wednesday comes, and you go, oh, what did we learn on Sunday? You can go back and be able to revisit those pieces and be able to regain focus, which is what Isaiah is trying to paint the picture of in this moment. He say, listen, I know that you feel like it is dark and nothing could get better, but I want to encourage you to the end of what Jesus really does. And it starts in Isaiah 9 in verses 2 and following, shares this. He said, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. Verse 3, he says, you have enlarged, you've grown the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, and as warriors rejoice when they are dividing the plunder. When we've conquered something, when we put in the work, when we watch what happens on the other side, when things are difficult and it's not easy. Not like this quick fix, like we go to Barnes & Noble and bookstore, and we walk in and we go to the self-help section, and we go, this is going to be the thing. The reason the self-help section is so big, and if you could have helped yourself, then you wouldn't have needed the book. Don't go and you can't do it. God has a different plan for you. You can't do it on your own. He's saying, listen, the beauty happens when Jesus comes. He continues on. He says, for as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them and the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. And if you go, you're like, Midianites, what's that about? I'm going to unpack that a bit. See, the story of Midian, the Midianites, was that there was this guy named Gideon. He said, and Gideon was told, listen, I am going to give the Midianites into your hands. Like, you are going to be able to conquer them, you and the army that you man. And he's like, great. He said, there's only one problem. The problem is that right now, your army is so big, you would walk out of that, and it's kind of like when we're really great at something, when we have like the skill set and the talents and all that, and we get done with something, we go, hey, look at me. He goes, listen, I think that if you go into battle now in the state that you're in, it is going to be all about you when you conquer them. And so we're going to whittle down this army a bit. And he does. He uses this process through a few different moments, makes this army down almost to nothing, just a few hundred of them. And now Gideon's like, God, time out. I know you created a promise that we're going to conquer this, but we are wildly outnumbered here. This is going to go badly. He said, but do you trust me? It's all right, God. And so they went to the edge of the camp and armed with glass bottles as they began to break this. And on the count of 3, and they broke the bottles and they screamed really loud and there's fire and they're waving stuff around. Well, the guys woke up from their slumber. All the Midianites woke up and they thought they were being attacked and started going at one another. And so all they had to do on the edge of the camp was yell really loud and make noise, and God gave them over without even really doing anything except trusting. And so Isaiah is hearkening back there. He said, listen, don't you remember the days of Midian's defeat where it was about God's movement, that it's not about yours, that God is the one that brings that all to fruition. Verse 5 said, every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning and be fuel for the fire. Listen, you will not have to battle anymore. God will be your strength. Verse 6, for unto us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called, and we're going to revisit this a bit, Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince, and this is so good, Prince of Peace. It says, of the greatness of his government and the peace, there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. In the zeal of the Lord, the movement of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. You see, God's saying, listen, don't worry. When it comes to those battles you think you can't win, God's got it. Those moments where you feel like you are just overwhelmed and there's no way that you can win, God's got you. The moments where you can't, you go, God, where are you? Where is your movement? And we've been there. We've been there in our marriages. We've been there in our parenting. We've been there in our dating situations. We've been there at work, with neighbors, with family. Oh, we've been there with family. In all of these moments where we go, God, where are you? How are you moving? I am frustrated. We've been there in our inner turmoil of anxiety and depression. We've walked that out here as a community. The things that overwhelm us. God, I don't know if I can do this. And I guess it leads me to ask us this question. Why are you so scared of the wilderness in those moments where things are hard? Why are we so scared that somehow, some way, that God, the God who created us, the God who made us, that somehow he won't provide in those moments? And I think I understand why this is, because we watch a lot of failure and we watch a lot of difficulty and we go, God, I think my situation might be a little different. God, things aren't going the way that I had hoped. God, things are hard. Things are troublesome. And it reminds me of these little plants here. How many of you guys have a green thumb generally? Like you can keep plants alive. So I see a handful of you. How many of you have a black thumb like me? And like everything, yeah. I feel like I am immediately the messenger of death. Like I will just touch them and be like, and you. Plants, I think they even say out loud as they're walking into our house, and this is where I come to die. Like they're, and so we have had and they're succulents. They are called and referred to as the unkillable plants. Like you plant it, you like throw a drop of water in its direction and they're supposed to live. We kill these things like they're going out of style. Like we just constantly, and we'll get them, and every time they march into our home, I'm like, this is the time that we will keep them alive. And sure enough, a few weeks later, womp, womp, they die. And honestly, I look at it and I just go, man, it's because we're not caring for them well. It's because we're not paying careful attention to the instructions on how to get them in the right amount of light. We give them too much light, we give them too much water, give them not enough water, not enough light. There's so many factors that go in there, and I just go, man, I think I need to boil it down to the basics. But I think for a lot of times I feel like these plants, like, man, don't worry about me. I don't need a lot of water. Just don't bother me. But then when I need you, you better get over here right now. Go hurry up and water me, do what I need to do. And once you do that, leave me alone. I will do my stuff on my own. When I need you, I will let you know. I'll begin to wither a little bit, come in here, water me, and then go away. And unfortunately, I've watched over decades of ministry people operate like this, going, man, I'll rush in when I feel thirsty. God, hurry up and provide for me. And then I'll disappear from the landscape of your movement and from church until things get dicey again. And then I need me some Jesus, and so I'm going to roll in. Woo, things are difficult. I see it all the time. And I'm not guilting any of us. And I know that's a normal behavior. But if we were sustained by God at all times, it would make such a big difference if we really believed that he was the one that did so. Which leads me to this little plant right here. These things look pretty dead, don't they? This is called the Rose of Jericho. If you saw this at your local gardening center, how many of you would pull an employee aside and go, I think you're selling dead things? These things look absolutely awful. I'm a nerd, so I was watching a botanist documentary. Yeah. 18-year-old me would not be pleased with 40-year-old me. And I was watching this, and I go, man, what is going on? They were talking about plants that surprise us and how they're able to survive. Now, you could get this plant and leave it in the corner of your room with nothing else for a decade. You could throw it in your attic. You could stick this in your trunk today and leave it in the trunk of your car for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And what's fascinating to me is what happens when you introduce it back to what it needs. Why don't you guys check this out? Are you willing to maintain in the wilderness so you can marvel at God's movement when it's all done? You see, what's fascinating to me with this plant, this resurrection plant, is the moment that it realizes that it's not going to be getting water that it needs day in and day out, is it begins to curl in on itself and then ration out what water it knows. The only thing it knows to survive, it rations it out however long it would need to last. It stops breathing and moves its way in and says, I will only live off of what I know can help me to survive. Any other external movement I'm going to ignore except that which breathes life into my very being. How many of you guys have been there where you thought, God, I'm struggling and I need you right now? How many of you ever been there? Yeah. Saw somebody in the middle row there. Little goatee action here. Why don't you take one of these? You can throw that in there. About 4 hours it takes. And you put that in a bowl and you can watch that thing transform in 4 hours. Can sit for 10 years waiting for that sustaining movement. Saying, I will trust that what I've collapsed in will sustain me until I'm introduced back to the wellspring that can help me to thrive. And the moment that it touches that water, it begins to transform yet again. Not dead, but sustaining and living off of what only can help it live. Which is why the coming of Jesus is so vital. See, the arrival of Jesus brings hope to your spirit and mind and light into your wilderness. I love the way that Frederick Buechner, after he passed, there was a collection of his writings and sermons called A Room Called Remember. He shares this. It says, to be commanded to love God at all, let alone in the wilderness, is like being commanded to be well when we are sick, to sing for joy when we are dying of thirst, to run when our legs are broken. But this is the first and greatest commandment nonetheless, even in the wilderness. And he pauses, especially in the wilderness. You shall love him. You do this because you are loved without limits. That's what the arrival of Jesus brings to you and I. That even when life is hard, even when life doesn't make sense, in loss of loved ones, in difficulties in relationships, for those of you guys in high school and middle school, those moments where you just go, I just want to do what I want to do, and you've been pressed in certain places in your life, and you feel like it's overwhelming and you can't do it, that God is the one that sustains you. And you will have people that will pop into your life. And I remember being your age going, oh, adults. And all the adults will laugh. Why? Because we remember what it was like then, and now we see it now, and we go, man, if only I had known then what I know now. And what we know now that we wish we had known then is that those things, while heavy then, are trivial in the grand scheme of the way God is moving in our lives. And God, I'm going to trust you. And that little thing will pale in comparison to how great and amazing you are. You see, what we learn in this process is that we love God. And those, like Frederick Buechner said, we love God in the wilderness because he calms our fears. The writer Isaiah shared. He said, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. I love when a room is illuminated because I don't bump into things. My kids, and they're amazing, but they're kids, so they'll leave stuff out. Even last night after we had some people over and I woke up this morning, I was walking through a hallway and it was dark. And I tripped over something and I fell. And I thought some things. I didn't say them out loud, but I thought some things. And I was not very happy. And I tripped and I fell, almost hit my head on the wall. And I was like, oh, but the moment I turn on the light, I go, oh yeah, I remember that was there. I remember us all moving these chairs and tables and everything. I'm like, I should have remembered, but that's how we are sometimes. Even when we remember that things were there and we know that we placed it there, we forget. And then we get caught up in the darkest moments. We get caught up in the hard times and we forget the landscape of what is happening. And I love the fact that even in the wilderness, God calms our fears. I will be a light to you, and it will be okay. Not only that, we love God in the wilderness because he brings us hope. The writer Isaiah shares, you have grown the nations and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest. And we know this a bit from having many of you probably sat around a table here at Thanksgiving and shared a meal with friends, with family, and you enjoyed that time together. And there's something about, and you smell all the smells. I remember growing up, and we go, is it time to eat yet? My mom would be like, no, get up. When's it time to eat? When I tell you it's time to eat. But then you're ready to eat. And then you go in and you do it, and oh, it's good. This Thanksgiving, we were supposed to have friends over, and it didn't work out because our kid was sick, and so we made our stuff that we were supposed to make, split it in half, and then traded so they could have it. And they had made these sweet potatoes. Now, the first time I had these was at Ruth's Chris. I've only been there once, and it was on somebody else's dime, which was great. So you have to like sell a kidney to eat there. And at the meal, they had these sweet potato casserole. I don't know if you've ever had this. Like, I had it, and like as I ate it at the restaurant, I was just like melting. And I was like, this is so good. They're like, what would you want for dessert? I said, that. She's like, yeah, the sweet potato. I said, yes, more of that. And so they made a copycat recipe, our friends, and they brought it over. And so Thanksgiving, I had my plate, and then I had the tin pan. It was about this wide, this long, about that deep. And I had my plate in that tin because nobody else in my family likes sweet potatoes but me. And so I am just eating out of the tin, no judgment. And I'm eating out of the thing, and I'm having all of that rushing back. It was so good. And I get, like, we have those moments, those things that are just amazing, and it's just like an overwhelming feeling for us. I want to trust God in the wilderness and have the same feeling about God when life is hard as when life is going well. Those moments where things are joyful and things are amazing and they're awesome. What if I had had no food that day? Would I still be the same joyful person than when I had all the stuff? What if my job were to go away? What if something were to happen to my family? Would I still have the same joy and hope in God even when it didn't make sense? Is God the one that's sustaining me even when everybody else in moments in your life and in mine look and go, it looks like you're dead? Go, nope. I'm holding on to the only thing that can sustain me, and it's God. See, even in the wilderness, we will love God in that moment because he sent Jesus. For unto us a child is born, a son is given. The government will be on his shoulders. All you guys worried about a 2020 election, God's got it. Quit worrying. He will be called Wonderful Counselor. Those moments where you don't know who to talk to, you can talk to God. He will be called Mighty God. The moments where you don't feel strong and life is difficult, with relationships, with your spouse, with your parents, with people around you, God can be your strength. Everlasting Father, if you grew up in a house situation with your parents or a caregiver, whatever, and they did not model for you what it was like to be a parent, don't worry, because God is the one that can give you a beautiful and perfect glimpse into what it means to be a father, and he can care for you even when it's difficult. But more than anything else, I love this Prince of Peace. That the coming of Jesus ushers in a peace that surpasses everything that we could imagine. Because the chaos of life is hard. And if you've never been there, I don't want to put this on you, but you will have it. You will have a moment, if not now, at some point where life feels like it is falling apart, the bottom drops out, it's all hit the fan, and you go, God, why? The coming of Jesus brings a peace that even when I feel like I am at my worst, God, you could breathe life into me and be the only one that sustains me. See, he brings hope to your spirit. He's a light to your wilderness. But that doesn't happen unless you trust him. You can come to church and not have a relationship with Jesus. You can go to a small group and talk about the Bible and not have a relationship with Jesus. You can go serve the homeless and it'll be amazing, but not have a relationship with Jesus. You can give thousands of dollars to nonprofits and organizations and churches to help those in need, but you could do all of that and still not have a relationship with Jesus. You see, we can walk all the steps out that we think will get us there, but until we have a relationship that could go into the darkest moments and everybody else would think we're dying, we go, no, 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 don't you get it twisted. My God is keeping me alive. And he's the only thing that I'm clinging to. Even when everybody else thinks it could be something else, it's God. And don't you worry, when I get even close to his movement, you're going to watch me flourish. But I can't make that choice for you. That choice is yours. Who will you choose?
Thanks for tuning in to the Forefront Church video podcast. Our hope and prayer is that this has left you encouraged and challenged you in your faith. And you might have some questions and some ways that you want to figure this out, and we want to help with that. Head over to forefrontchurch.info, and there's a couple different ways that you can connect. Click the Connect tab and let us know how we can be praying for you, or a staff member can be contacting you this week. Maybe you have just been encouraged by this and want to support the ministry here at Forefront Church. You can click the Giving tab, as well as other tabs that are in there to help you along in your journey with God. And so we're thankful for you. Thanks for tuning in, and we cannot wait to see you again here online on the video podcast. We love you, and we'll see you then.